Thank you, everyone, for coming back here to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. Well, the high-profile trial of Doomsday cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell continues in Boise, Idaho. As you know, she is charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and other charges over the deaths of her daughter, Tylee Ryan, and her adopted son, J.J. Vallow, and also her husband, Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell, who died, according to the state, by asphyxiation. Court was dark Friday, but testimony resumed today. And our own Gigi McKelvey joins us now from outside the Ada County Courthouse. Gigi, good afternoon. And I have so many questions to ask you. You have been in that courtroom directly looking at Lori Vallow for the last few days of trial. Who is on the stand right now, and what is the testimony about?
Right now, we have a female agent from the FBI who is starting to go through all these different burner phones, phone numbers, email accounts, telling what they were stored at under everybody's phone, Google searches, that kind of thing, just sort of a timeline of how things were leading up that whole year. It's not really a set time that they're looking at. This is ranging from January all the way up through the next year. So we're seeing kind of in the infancy, some of the calls and the numbers, and then also all the way up to the day of Tammy Daybell's funeral, Lori Vallow searching for wedding dresses in Kauai.
Wow, in Kauai, one of the islands in Hawaii. Now, there's apparently over 100 phones, burner accounts, and emails. Was there an explanation as to why Chad Daybell and Lori Daybell had so many phones and email accounts?
Well, they were just hiding what they were doing. In fact, at one point, Tylee Ryan was heard by Melanie Gibbs saying that Lori looked like a drug dealer, fumbling all of her phones around. I think it was just different ways to try to make it difficult to track down what they were doing. They just, they found 10 electronic devices, by the way, when they executed that search warrant on the island of Kauai, when they searched the car that Chad and Lori were driving. So clearly they had a lot of electronics with them and were using them to contact different people for different purposes. Some phones were just for Lori and Chad, some were for everybody. So just kind of a mixed bag of who was calling who on which phone.
Now, as you know, and we all know, they've been following this case. Initially, Tammy Daybell's death was considered natural. She did not have an autopsy, but she was later exhumed, and her cause of death was found to be, that will be testified to, we anticipate, and asphyxiation. But at the time of her death, or just before her death, I understand that these searches show more activity about wedding rings besides the wedding dress. Could you give us the breakdown of what Lori Vallow Daybell was doing and buying and when?
Yeah, she was buying, this was a couple of months before Tammy Daybell died, looking at malachite rings. We know she bought some off Etsy, but the person that owned that store didn't have time to do it. There was a purchase for $808 for 2 malachite rings. One was an 11.5, and I assume that would be Chad's, and the smaller one was a 4.25 size ring for $808. So they were definitely planning their wedding way before Miss Tammy Daybell was allegedly murdered by Chad.
And how close to the alleged murder of Tammy Daybell did Lori Daybell search for wedding dresses for her beach wedding in Hawaii?
Well, we know some of that goes as far back as even before Charles was murdered, I believe in May, but kind of consistent searches up until Tammy Daybell was murdered. Not a whole lot, but, you know, she was regularly searching for different things that would lead you to think they were planning a wedding, as well as also some stored contact information for the minister who performed the ceremony. And my understanding is that minister will testify in this trial at some point as well. There were over 600 pictures taken at that beachside wedding, by the way. I really hope we see all of them.
Yeah, and before I get into that with you more, just one more question on these searches. You mentioned Charles. Now, Charles is Charles Vallow. That would be Lori Vallow's fourth husband, who was killed by her brother, Alice Cox, and the police called it a suicide. Has the jury learned of that? Not a suicide, called it a self-defense. I apologize. Has the jury learned of that?
They have learned that it was deemed a self-defense, but it's come out since then that it was a murder. It was said by a witness on the stand. And so, yeah, they're very well aware now. The look on their faces when this was first revealed to them was kind of shock. There were several that were shocked. This jury's taking notes nonstop, by the way. And you have to in a case like this if you don't know much about it, which I really do think this jury panel is pretty much in the dark about this case based on their reactions and how much they're having to write. And our tent just about flew away. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and shocked about how many deaths there are surrounding Lori Vallow Daybell. Now let's go to the beach wedding. There's somebody, the minister who performed the wedding in Hawaii is going to testify. What do you anticipate he's going to say?
I'm not sure. That's what I've heard, is that he is on the witness list. Now, I do know I heard later on that once he found out about JJ and Tylee and the whole situation, once the kids' bodies was found, this poor man had to have counseling. Just being associated with this couple and everything that happened surrounding them. So it'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say about the wedding ceremony. I do know, in spite of the fact Chad cashed in that major life insurance policy, he went for the cheapest package.
Yeah, and given the fact that the minister may have had to have counseling, the jury is there, I'm sure, not awestruck is not the right word, but really in disbelief. They may have PTSD, but given that, how is Lori Vallow, since you're in the courtroom, acting, reacting, and how is the jury reacting to her?
Well, today she seems a little happier, and the reason is her sister, Summer Shiflett, is sitting in today. For the first time, we have somebody in Lori's family. I also think her uncle is here in the courthouse. I've heard they're very nice people, have spoken to several members of the public and been polite. So she seems to be a little happier today. I don't know if it's a show, maybe to show her sister she's just fine. But, the jury always watches her, especially at key moments. They will look over at her to see her reaction, which for the most part is a non-reaction or one that's just not appropriate for the topic at hand. And that's kind of been a consistent thing throughout this trial, is the emotions don't match the topic at hand.
Yeah, so with that, because we do know she did have some mental issues, she was incompetent to stand trial a couple of times. But with that, you're also in the courtroom, Gigi, and you follow this case, and you are almost my human bellwether. You could tell how things are going. What, to you, was the most important thing you heard this morning that helps the prosecution advance to a conviction in this case?
Well, I think that, they started looking at some Google searches by Chad, which was the day before Tylee Ryan was allegedly buried on his property. He was Googling wind direction to see what direction the wind was going to be in that morning that they would have been burying her. There were searches for Ned Schneider, which we know is the first demon that possessed Charles. There were searches for obituaries for this Ned Schneider in Louisiana, which is where Charles is from. His theory was that this was a childhood friend of Charles's that passed away and attached himself to Charles's body. So those Google searches were a bit bizarre, and a lot of travel between this group, a lot of different receipts for airfare and things like that. So we're not finished with her yet. This next set of testimony is going to be a little bit more lengthy, which is why we broke for lunch. So we should have much more for you later today about the contents of these phone calls, or at least the contents of the phone and Google searches, hopefully leading up to and after the murders, to give us a little more insight into maybe what happened.
All right. And Gigi, I have one final question before I let you go back into that courtroom and get some lunch. With regard to Lori Vallow Daybell, what do you anticipate the defense is going to do with all this information that you are telling us, which is pretty damning, it seems?
It is damning. They have done a little bit more cross today than they have in the past. They're essentially just pointing out that Lori was in Missouri when Tammy Daybell was murdered. They have the data to show that, iCloud photos. But really, it's just more when Detective Stubbs was on the stand and they were going to introduce a thumb drive with pictures, it was questioning whether or not he knew the contents, because the exhibit number was different, although underneath that was the same exhibit number he used, what I'm assuming is when he testified for the grand jury. So that was brought in. It's more almost not attacking, but questioning the credibility of the witnesses more than questioning about their client's actions or defending their client. That's kind of where the cross-exam has been for days now with these witnesses, is more focusing on their role and what may you have gotten wrong, not so much what Lori has done wrong.
Gigi McKelvey, thank you for that in-depth analysis. I can't wait to hear from you more about how the prosecution is doing in this case. But right now, I know you have to get back to court. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Linda.